Ito po ang inyong Pinoy Physics teacher. Nakikita nyo ngayon ang dalawang favorite na gamit ko kapag nagko-compute ako ng problem sa physics. Okay? So, intro muna tayo. Okay, so mapagpatuloy po natin yung topic natin sa sinimulan at malapit na tayong matapos doon sa topic na yon. Topic is Coulomb's law. Problem solving and continuation to ng problem solving sa Coulomb's law na last time. So, ang ating first setup ay ang calculation of the net electric force from the line segment. Okay, so this is our first situation. Charges on the Cartesian coordinate plane. Okay, so one charge is center, negative on one side, positive on the other side, so on. So this is our current setup. So in current setup natin is that the two are separated by half a meter. Although yung main charges natin, ang testing charge natin nasa center, they're separated. And ang problem is how much force does this one, Q prime, experience from Q1 and from Q2 together. Numerical ang pag-solve natin to, hindi na visual unlike last time. So the force between Q1, ang solution, this is the arrow. Of course, we're going to solve that, no? Notice that the arrow points on the right side. So given Q prime at 1 Coulomb, Q is of 1 Coulomb, their separation is 0.5 meter. Okay. So in that case then, how do you going to solve that? So we disregard the signs because we have already included the signs sa pagdetermine ng direction ng arrow. So our F1 starts at 8.988 times 10 to the 9. I just removed the units for convenience. Okay, so 1, both of them are 1, absolute value, and square of 0.5. We come up with this value, 8.988 times 10 to the 9, and so on. So your final answer is 35.95 times 10 to the 9 newtons. Or giganewtons. Corrections before. So vector siya, we have to specify the direction. So since pointing to the right, usually along the x-axis we assign that as 0 degrees. Okay, so as obvious is shown by the other. Okay, next, the other force. This time as the force from Q2 to Q prime at the position of Q prime. So since they're opposite sign, therefore they are attracted. Okay, the direction is the same. And this is the solution. So Q prime 1 Coulomb, Q1 is supposed is not anymore Q. This is Q2 negative 1 Coulomb at a distance of 0.5 meters. We disregard again the signs, and the solution is exactly the same sa kanina. And the direction is still 0 degrees, and we come up with the final solution in which both of them pointing at the right side. Therefore, we just add them. And we come up with a total of 71.9 times 10 to the 9 Newton, still pointing at 0 degrees, as shown by the animation. Okay, it's giganewton or giganewtons. That's the final answer. Our next setup. Calculation of the net electric force, this time on an equilateral triangle containing alternatingly negative and positive charges. Call that setup number 2. So here we have negative 1 coulomb on this side, positive 1, negative 1. And of course, although yung color nagbaligtad, no? Okay. So we have Q1, negative, positive, negative, and the center charge. The size of the equilateral triangle is 1 meter on one side. Okay. So the solution to this one, if you want to have a mathematical solution, is we place first the entire system in a coordinate system. And the force of Q1 to Q prime is, okay, going that way. Kasi nga attracted tong charge papunta dun sa isa. Okay? Question is, ano yung distance na yan? It's not given. So, in order for us to get that, let's go back to our math moment. So, marami tayong math moment from now on. The math moment, one of the less favorite part ng mga ibang science students. But mathematics is really needed talaga sa physics. Okay, so our triangle is 1 unit on the side. Okay, the internal angle is 60. Since equilateral yan, they're all 60. So if you drop an angle bisector, it creates an altitude to this horizontal one, and doing the same on one other vertex. This angle bisector automatically divides 60 to produce what you call 30 degrees. And since this is 1, so this length, this is a triangle then, a right triangle na having a 30 degrees on one side, so automatically this one is 60 kasi nga this is 90. So what is the length of this one? We're not concerned with this one yet. So what's that? Okay, so for a trigonometric function, this is the cosine 30 degrees refers to the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse side. Now, rearranging, we have h times cosine of 30 degrees gives you the value of b, which is already given at 0.5. Okay, so h then can be computed by b over cosine of 30 degrees. So, with the values given, 0.5 over 0.866 gives you a value of 0.577 as the height or proportions of that, if you were to consider several different sizes of equilateral triangle. Therefore, we go back. So this side is now, okay, 0.577 meters. Kasi nga 1 meter naman siya. In our example, is 1 unit. So it's just the same. The square of that happens to be a third of 0.333 meters squared. In case of E remains the value. So if we solve that using the Coulomb's law, we still come up with this formula, except that RR now is already 5.577 meter squared. So, removing the units by cancellation. So we come up with a formula of 8.988 times 10 to the 9 Newton over 0.333 or 26.99 times 10 to the 9 Newton. What is the direction then? How do you get that direction? Now, 26.99 is just the same as 27 na. As close as to possible. Let's go back to another math. Bakit anong direction yan? Okay. So, notice that this is already 30 degrees. That's our math moment. Placing that on a Cartesian coordinate plane again, this angle then, this is 30 degrees, no? But that's not the angle we're looking for kasi the vertex starts from this position going to that one. So, you don't need this one. What you need is this one. And how do you get that? Okay. So, So that angle theta, this is 30 degrees by reason of this one is also 30 degrees, no? They are opposite, alternating. This one is 180 degrees. So ang total nila is 210 degrees. So therefore, our unit, therefore, the angle of our force vector is 210 degrees. So our final answer is 27 times 10 to the 9, pointing at 210 degrees. Remember, this is just a two-dimensional problem. Okay. If you're going to use naman Q3, which has similarly done, except that it's pointing on this side, the angle now is negative 30. Why? Okay. From here, going down, that's negative 30. Kasi nga 30 to, di ba? Again, alternating. And for this one, since this is being repelled, being the same sign, this one's pointing downward. Again, it has the same magnitude as this one, only that it is pointing directly downward. So, what's the angle of that one? That's 270. So, this is our origin going that way. That is 270 degrees. You can also write this down as negative 90 degrees. Okay, so that's the final answer then. So what is the final answer for all three vectors? Okay, so for Q1, okay, 27 times 10 to the 9, 210 degrees. The other one, F2, is 26.99 or 27 times 10 to the 9, going down at 270 degrees. And the other one, F3, is again the same magnitude, only that it is pointing at negative 30 degrees below the x-axis, the 0 degree line. Question is, what is the sum of those three? The answer is already given. It's 54 times 10 to the 9 newtons, which is the easy answer. If you remember, the sum of the two forces on Q1 and Q2 is just the same because this vector and that vector have the same x, has the same x component, except that opposite in direction, so they cancel out. What's left is this y, and half of that goes from here, and the other half coming from here is added, which makes this one just the same as the other one, as the force from Q2 to Q1. So it's just multiplying the force of Q2 by 2. So the final answer is just twice the magnitude of the force coming from Q2, which we call F2. Approximately 54 times 10 to the 9 newtons. However, if you're not satisfied with the way it was answered, there's another way for me to show you. If you're not interested with that one, you may proceed to you may skip that one. It's a little bit longer than this one kasi shorter yung solution, medyo mabilis, no? But that's the beauty of visualizing first your problem. So pag visualize mo yung problem, it's actually easier to solve. However, if you do not like to visualize but you come up with a plain mathematical solution of using component method, what we're going to do is just going to erase everything and place them on a table. Now, F1 is 27 times 10 to the 9, 210 degrees. F2, 27 times 10 to the 9, 270 degrees. And F3, 27 times 10 to the 9, negative 30 degrees. Lay them down on this side of the table along with the ratio, along with the sum of that. Now, on one column, you specify the x component of those forces and the y component of those forces. And it is specified as the force times the cosine of the angle along the x component, or the force times the sine of the angle of the force along the y component. The result of that can be summed up to come up with the summation of force along x and the summation of forces along y. Now, so we solve that first by showing you cosine of 210, okay, the sign of the angle for each of the forces. So, iba-iba sila ng angle. They have different values of cosines and sines. And, of course, when you do multiply that once more, you come up with these values. Negative 23.4, 0, positive 23.4, which means these two cancel each other out. Plus 0, ganun din. Now, this is already expected, di ba? This one, on the other hand, negative 35, negative 7, 25, negative 13.5, negative 27, negative 13.5, and so on. So, when you sum that up, you come up with a 0 on this side and a negative 54 on this side. Now, notice that I did not include anymore the exponent because they're all the same. So, you can just manipulate the coefficient and then add the 10 to the 9 later. It's a lot easier that way. To solve for the angle of the resultant force, F sub r then, okay, may clue dyan, no? Kasi your f of x is 0, but you only have f of y, which is negative, so basically pointing downward. So if you do follow the standard solution, if you want to get the resultant is the square of the forces along x, all the forces along x, and the square of the sum of the forces along y, which in this case, this 0 is a negative, square mo magiging positive, kunin mo square root, you come up again with 54. Of course, i-attach na lang natin 10 to the 9 kasi you might be mistaken that the answer is just 54. It's actually 54 times 10 to the 9. Now, to get the angle of that one, he used the original formula for tangent of the summation of forces along y over the summation of forces along x. That's y over x. No? Now, that is not tangent but more of arctangent or the angle in which that ratio represents. So, in this case, tangent negative 1 or the arctangent of negative 54 over 0, which is actually a negative infinity. And that's not, we don't like that, no? In order for you to get that value, meron naman ng actual idea. Since tangent values approach either positive or negative, you either happen to have a 90 or a 270. The clue is the negative value of y component. Ito. So, the angle is 270 degrees. The angle in which the object is pointing down. That's the final answer then. Notice that pareho yung answer kanina. Yun is 53.99. This is 54. Negative, pareho, no? So, notice that masosolve din siya kagad. Another way is determination of the net electric force. If you want to review that, you can just go back. You can rewind the video a little bit back if you want to understand once more kung ano yung solution. But this time, we proceed to the next problem. A square of length 1 meter with alternating positive and negative charges placed on its vertices. So, how do you solve the problem if you place a charge at the center? Exactly at the center, this one. Well, okay, so the forces, it is important that we find this distance or that distance. They're all equal anyway because this one is placed equidistant from all four, being the geometric center of the square. No? So, what is that value? We need to find that one. To get the value of R1, let's do the math moment again. The math moment. Okay, this arrow then, you want to find that out. There are two ways to do that. Determining the center radius of a square of a unit, 1 unit on one side. Okay, this is side A, side B, and side C, which is a typical right triangle. And usually right triangle have a solution of, okay, that one, usually referred to as the Pythagorean theorem. Now, if A and B happens to be equal to 1, so the value of C is just the square root of 2. So, diba, A, 1 squared plus 1 squared equals, okay, 2, which is equal to C squared. So, therefore, C is a square root of 2. Plus or minus actually, but there's no negative distance in this case. So, we use 1.414 being the square root of 2. Another one is that you have to memorize this one. So, kailangan na memorize yung ibang mga given values ng science, ng mathematics. So, usually a special triangle is formed when a diagonal is drawn. So, we draw this diagonal. This forms what you call a 45, 90 degree special triangle. And it's already known that if this is 1 and 1, this is square root of 2. Which means that yung r, kalahati nung square root of 2. Half of the square root of 2. And that's half of that, 0.707. You'll encounter that number several times. So, okay? Now that we know the value of r, we can now solve the force acting on this one. And since they're all the same charges, hindi lang pareho ng signs, you come up with the same magnitude and with different directions as well. The value of R1, R sub 1 is 0.707. Solving the Coulomb force between Q prime and Q sub 1, okay? Substitute mo yung K sub E, multiply mo ng C squared na yan, then divide mo pa ng 0.5. Okay. Now, incidentally, hindi lang nailagay dito, no? 0.777 happens to be 1/2 of the square root of 2. Square nun would be 1/2. Okay? The square ng 1 over square root of 2 is 1 over 2. And that is 0.5. So, basically, you multiply this number by 2 lang, no? So, you come up with 17.98 times 10 to the 9 Newton. Okay. Now, that same magnitude is also the same sa Q3. It's also the same with Q2 and with Q4. Now, if you combine all the forces, you come up with all forces that are diagonally set on screen. No? So, you plot the entire graphical representation to the coordinate plane. Problem lang, the forces are at an angle. So, mag-solve ka pa ng sine, cosine na naman. However, para mas madali, i-tilt po na lang yung axis such that nagmamatch yung mga forces dun sa x and y axis. So, di pa mas madali, no? In that case, so, we come up with F2, 17.98 times 10 to the 9 at x-axis. Okay, F4, 17.98 times 10 to the 9 at x-axis again. So, you sum up the two, come up with 0. Ganun din sa F3 and sa F1. You come up with 0. So, final answer is 0 plus 0. 0 din. O, di ba? Andali. Okay, so, this is the Pinoy physics teacher teaching you how to solve the problem, a very simple problem like that. Okay, so see you next time kapag nagbigay na ako another problem.